which boat has to yield when they come into contact. So for right of way, so what is the most fundamental rule of right of way for any of you guys returning sailors or anybody that is, has been sailing before? What's the most fundamental rule?
Is it hit other boats?
What was that?
Is it to try to hit other boats?
Oh, what do you say?
Don't hit other boats.
Yeah, so don't hit other boats. That's like definitely the rule of, like, you don't want to hit anybody's boats. Don't hit anybody. So if you hit somebody, there's always someone at fault. So if you hit somebody, you can't just get off scot-free. Somebody has to have a penalty. Can anybody tell me another right of way?
Starboard over port.
Yes, whoever said that.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Starboard over port.
Yeah, starboard and port. That's a great one. We'll get into each of these in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, but can anybody list another key right of way?
Windward v. Leeward.
Yeah, great one. Windward Lure. There's one more that is pretty essential. One of like the big 3 right of way rules that I'm looking for. Does anybody know what it is?
It's like sail power, manpower, all that one, motor.
Yeah, that is the biggest one. If you're ever dealing with boats that aren't sailboats, if you come into contact with a motorboat, a sailboat always has right of way. But there's one more that is specifically between sailboats that is pretty important.
Is it distress?
Clear ahead versus clear astern.
Yeah, Peyton got it. Okay. So let's talk about these in a little bit more detail. So just kind of generally for each of these, so I'll go into them. So for this first one, starboard and port. So that means basically if the wind is coming from this direction, whenever we're drawing on the whiteboard, wind always comes from the top of the board. If we have one boat here, that's like this, and one boat here that's like this, which boat would we say is on starboard and which one is on port? If this is A and B, which boat is on starboard?
B.
B? Yeah, that's correct. So B is starboard, which means that A is port. And which boat has right of way in this situation?
B.
Right. Okay. So starboard boat has right of way. In a starboard boat scenario or a starboard port scenario where these boats are obviously going to come into contact right here, this boat has right of way. And so what does that mean for the port boat? So if the starboard boat has right of way, then that means that the port boat has to avoid them. And so that means that the starboard boat can continue sailing on his merry way like this all the way out to forever. And the port boat is probably going to have to tack or duck, or you make another maneuver to get out of the way of that starboard boat because they can't hit them. If they do hit them, if there is a breach of rights, so if this port boat hits the starboard boat, or if the starboard boat has to avoid in any way, then the port boat, generally for dinghy sailing, so generally the penalty is two 360s. So if you do, so if rights are broken, then we get two 360s. And 360s are pretty bad. You don't want to have to do 360s. So don't hit other boats and don't break rights.
Hey, Mitchell, how can I
Yeah.
tell if I'm on a starboard tack or a port tack?
That's a great question, Jack. So you can tell if you're on a starboard tack based on what side of the boat your sails are on. So they say, I'm going to draw this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to erase this and then draw this a little bit more clearly so you guys can see it. So if your boat looks like this, you know, your sail's like this, the wind is coming over this side of the boat. And so your sails are on the port side, the wind is coming over your starboard side. So they call that starboard tack. So it's determined based on which side of the boat the wind crosses first. So here the wind crosses the starboard side first. So you would be on starboard tack. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. And also vice versa. If your boat looks like this, so here is starboard and port, the wind is hitting your port side first, so you would be on port tack. Okay, and this brings me into my next point, which is Windward Lure. So Windward Lured scenario kind of looks like this. So if there are two boats, I'm just going to say they're on like a beam reach for now because it's easier. So if there are two boats like this, so you'll notice these boats are both on starboard tack because the wind is hitting the starboard side first. And say maybe this boat is going like this and this boat's going like this. They're gonna hit. Which boat in this scenario has right of way? I'll just make this B and this is A.
Boat B.
Right, boat B. And boat B has right of way because they are considered lured. So lured always has right of way. Lured isn't a very intuitive name, so it's easier to remember the windward one. So you're windward if you're closer to the wind. So the wind is blowing from this direction, from this point up here, from this direction. So if the wind is hitting you first, then you are windward. If there's another boat that the wind is hitting first, then you are lured of that boat. And so like you could say, like if there was a mark here and you were going like this, you're a boat, you are lured of this mark because the wind hits the mark first. Yeah, so in this scenario, boat A would have to get out of the way. So if this boat is heading up like this, then boat A also has to head up with them because boat A can't hit boat B or cause boat B to change their course. Otherwise, boat A has infringed upon the rights of boat B and they'll have to do two 360s. Does anybody have any questions about Windward Lure? Okay. So there's one other thing that I didn't mention. So for Windward Lure to apply, you have to have what they call overlap. And that means that boat B, so if you draw a line from the stern of boat B and the bow of boat B, and by same thing for boat A, you would say that the bow of boat A is overlapping the stern of boat B right here. So they're overlapping this amount of distance. And so that is the only case when the Windward Lure applies. So if these boats have overlap, then you would say that boat B has rights over boat A. In a situation where these boats are not overlapping, there's a different rule that comes into play, which is clear ahead. And remember, this is always when they're on the same tack. So on the same, if both boats are on starboard or both are on port. So that will bring me into the next thing, which is clear ahead. Does anybody have any questions about this before I move on to the next one? Okay, I will move on then. So in this scenario, we'll say we're going downwind. So we're going downwind, wind's coming from this way. We have a boat here. Say, just to make it easy, both of the sails are here. We have another boat like this. Both of the sails are here. So both of these boats are on starboard tack. There's no overlap, so the bow of this boat does not overlap the stern, so no overlap. In this scenario, which boat has right of way? This is A and this is B. I know there's a lot of you out there that know this, so I'm just going to keep waiting.
Someone take a wild guess. You have a 50
Boat
50
A.
shot.
I guess boat A.
You guessed boat A. You would be correct. Boat A has right of way. And that is because boat A is clear ahead. See, the answer was right there for you on the board. It would be pretty easy to guess. Boat A is clear ahead. So that means that if you're ahead in the race, the boats behind you, they can't just like ram into you because you're protected under this rule. So if you are clear ahead, then you have rights over those that are behind you. And that's provided that you are on the same tack and there's no overlap. Yeah, and so in this scenario, both of these boats are on starboard. There's no overlap. And so that prevents boat B from being able to just ram into the back of boat A. And so if boat B were to do that, they would have to do penalty spins. So they would have 2 360s to do if they rammed into the back of boat A. Okay, so the next one more thing that I want to talk about, quick scenario. You know, our boats always have 2 sails. So if we're going downwind, often we have our sails on different sides of the boat. So how do you tell which tack you're on if our sails are on different sides? So here we have, and there's the wind. This is boat A, boat B. So just shout it out. Which tack is boat A on?
Starboard.
Starboard. And boat B?
Port.
Port. And that is because even though the wind isn't technically coming over this side of the boat, it's determined upon which side of the boat your main sail is on. So your main sail is the sail that's further back, and it's the biggest one. And whichever side is opposite the side of your main sail is the tack that you're on. So in this case, the main sail is on the port side of the boat. So this is port and this is starboard. And so this boat would be on starboard tack. And vice versa, this boat would be on port tack because the sail is on the starboard side. And so in this situation, boat A would have right of way because they are on starboard tack. Okay. And obviously the biggest rule is don't hit anyone. If you hit anyone, that's a bummer because boats break and yeah, we don't like that. People get hurt sometimes. Anyway, does anybody have any questions about clear ahead or how to determine which side or which tack you're on when you're going downwind? Does anybody have any questions in general about anything that we talked about?
Hey Mitchell, what is your favorite shape of upwind mark?
I really like the tetrahedron. So that's a good one. Kind of like, I'll even try to draw it for you. It's kind of like one of these boys. It's like a triangle. Maybe you can draw it bigger. It's like a triangle, but it has like some depth to it. And so there's like, boom, and then it goes. Looks like that. Pretty cool mark shape, if you ask me. I appreciate the question, Jack. Anyway, if nobody has any questions, that is all I have for you for today's Chalk Talk.
Okay.